All right, welcome to the lesson on sexual harassment, otherwise entitled How Not to Get Yourself Fired. This lesson combines a couple of my favorite things. One, teaching people and educating people on things that I know. And two, setting up a really big I told you so. So listen to what I'm going to educate you on, and you'll be fine. Ignore it or disagree with it, and then you're setting yourself up for the biggest I told you so in history. Well, your history. Note, this one is easy. Just don't do sexual harassment. And how do you do that? Don't talk or do anything sexual at the workplace. When you think you wanna, just don't. Sexual talk doesn't have any value in the workplace. And any value you might think it has is totally outweighed by the consequences. The consequences is it is the easiest way to get yourself fired. That is as simple as it is, and we are done. Now, if you want to know the social studies about it, let's continue. But that's all you need to know. We're done with that. If you believe and listen to and follow exactly what I just said, you're fine. Here's the social studies. Definition of sexual harassment: speech or actions of a sexual nature that reasonably offend someone, or any amount of quid pro quo. Quid pro quo is defined. In Latin, it means you're going to get fired, or in serious, it means something for something. It is a workplace exchange of something for sexual actions. And the definition you already know, hostile work environment, it's exactly the same as hostile work environment harassment, which is when sexual harassment is bad enough that it becomes illegal. Illegal defined as punishable by the government. Our previous lessons were on discrimination and harassment in the workplace. This lesson is on sexual harassment in the workplace, and our future lessons are what to do when discrimination, harassment, or sexual harassment happens. So a quick aside, before we get into a real meat and potato part of the lesson, is the scope of sexual harassment laws, okay? So you do not want to do sexual harassment in any workplace, public or private, in any business. You also don't want to do it in any educational institution, okay? Because those are covered by also different laws than the workplace is covered from, but they are covered. Now, sexual harassment is not a thing on the street or the public, okay? So many people learn about sexual harassment in a course such as this, and then they think they might be protected when they're walking along the street or out in a public place. No, the answer is no. There's no laws against sexual harassment on the street or the public in the same way that we're talking about the laws in the workplace, okay? Now, there may be local laws that might apply, but I will tell you that those local laws are weaker than the state and federal laws in the workplace and education. So the level you're protected from sexual harassment in the workplace and education institutes is greater than the level you're protected on the street and public places, although you are still, to some degree, in some states, to some degree protected a little bit by local laws, but it is not even close to your protections when you're in the workplace. So the first type of sexual harassment is the quid pro quo, the something for something. This is where the sexual harassment laws started, okay? This is the most obvious form of sexual harassment. It is also the most, at this point in history, the most undebatably wrong and illegal form of sexual harassment. It is the exchange of something sexual for workplace reward. It is basically always illegal. There's no test to do. If it is the exchange of anything sexual for a workplace reward, it is just illegal. It is similar to discrimination in that regard. It is often done, usually, with a power imbalance. People of unequal power. This is where somebody is the boss, somebody is the worker, and because of that power imbalance, the worker wants their job, the worker wants advancement in the job, the boss has the power over the worker's job and the power to give advancements, reward or punishment. Because of that power imbalance, then the person in power institutes a quid pro quo, gets and offers a sexual something sexual for the reward, and because of the power imbalance, it is a very undesirable position, illegal, yet has happened often in history. There is often in this a promise of reward, but there is also a threat of punishment, which adds to the coercion of the whole scenario. Now, I would like to address something. I hear often an argument that it's all about power and nothing to do with sexual exchanges. And the answer is no, it's about both, okay? If it was only about power, all we would see is the people in power having the people without power wash their car over and over and go and collect groceries for them with the threat of firing. Now, we do see that, okay? And that is about power. That's an abuse of power. But if it was all about power, there would just be forced washing of cars all the time. No, it is. And this is one of the reasons why it's illegal and one of the reasons why we as a country fight back against this so much. There is an element of sexual favors. It's not all about power, okay? So this is one of the reasons we fight back about it. It is both the power imbalance. People do it for the power, and they also do it for the sexual favors. Now, it can be right out in the open, okay? And in fact, those with much, much, much more power in their jobs or profession just let it way out in the open. And you can do your research on the major cases of sexual harassment quid pro quo that are out there. And usually it's way out in the open with people in power. Or it could be just implied. It doesn't have to be explicitly said. It could be implied, and it's still illegal. So if people are making hints at a quid pro quo, that is still illegal. You can't even hint at it. Now, quid pro quo is very close to being a super precedent, as stated by in the legal system, in the Supreme Court system. Super precedent, meaning there's really no debate on it anymore, okay? The country has gone through the debates. The court system has gone through all the court cases, and it's always illegal. And the vast majority of people have debated against this and has already decided quid pro quo is something that we as a country, as a legal system, as a society do not want in the workplace. It is very similar to the super precedent of discrimination against race in the workplace. It's just not an argument or a debate we have anymore. It's just illegal. Now, I will go into some of the arguments because maybe this is the first time you're learning about quid pro quo. So I will go into some of the arguments of why it is illegal. So probably one of the best arguments as to why it should be illegal, and is because, think about it, selling sex is prostitution. And prostitution is illegal in like 49 out of 50 states at this recording. So if prostitution is illegal on the street, why then logically would, if you move it literally 400 yards into the workplace, or sometimes literally 10 feet into the workplace, why would it be legal in the workplace where if it was 10 feet away on the street, it would be illegal? So there's a logical discontinuity there. And that's one of the most forceful arguments of why it is illegal in the workplace. Some other things to consider. Some people might say, well, it's just the free choice of adults to engage in free choice and the government shouldn't get involved. But the thing about that is the power differential between boss and employee, and usually quid pro quo happens between boss and employee, the power differential significantly removes free choice. You know, if you have a job, and think about it, you rely on that job to feed your family, to get the money to survive. So it's not just you. Oftentimes it's like your kids and your spouse that relies on that money. And by the way, it's not just easy if you're fired. It's not just easy to go and get another job, okay? Not all the time is it that easy. So that right there means if somebody who can fire you is like offering quid pro quo, and it's not you don't really have a free choice, because refusal brings in the idea of the threat of being fired. So it's not a free choice between consenting adults because of the power imbalance. And this theory of this idea of power imbalance between two actors is well established in case law in the court system. There's many other parts in life where the courts realize that a power imbalance fundamentally changes how we look at things. Now, think about this, because it's a little, I don't want to say complicated, but it is in depth. Does this not lead, if we allow quid pro quo, does that not lead to sex discrimination? Because discrimination is illegal in the workplace. Treating and offering things based upon protected classes is literally illegal by discrimination law in the workplace. So think about it. If you have a supervisor who is then only offering promotions based upon quid pro quo sexual harassment, based on their own orientation, perhaps that means the supervisor is only offering it to one sex and not the other. And would that not be discrimination? Perhaps the supervisor would only offer the quid pro quo to unmarried people. Would that then be discrimination based on marital status, which has been proven to be illegal by case law? Would not the people that accept quid pro quo, perhaps it's based on religion, because certain religions, like literally specifically reject this kind of thing. So would not those who are offered the quid pro quo, could it be based on religion? And would that not be discrimination? So if you were to say quid pro quo should be illegal, it might lead to discrimination, which has been established is illegal. Two more things. One, this type of quid pro quo is considered, it's just considered morally wrong by a large percentage of the people in the U.S. When the studies have been shown, or studies have been done, and people have been polled, is this morally right? The answers come in as no. So a vast majority of our country believes that this is a morally wrong thing to do. And finally, in the workplace, promotions have usually been based on, and think about it, what do you think promotions are based upon? The vast majority of people believe that promotions should be based on ability to do the job and how good you are at the job. That is like a standard reason why promotions happen in the minds of many people. And so giving promotions or giving job favors or bonuses to those who do a sexual quid pro quo kind of goes against the, dare I say, the American idea. It could be whether it's a capitalist idea or a United States idea of fairness for promotions. I don't know where the idea really falls, but it does break the idea of what a promotion should be based on. And so it would be deemed as not, quote, fair. And those are the social studies reasons in the debates we've had over the last multiple years of why quid pro quo should be illegal. So that was quid pro quo, which is pretty understood and non-debatable as immediately illegal. So now we have a second type, a type 2 of sexual harassment in the workplace. Now that would be sexual harassment speech or actions. It performs exactly the same way as our harassment speech from a previous lesson. Okay, it is speech or actions of a sexual nature that reasonably offend people. The laws have deemed that in education, K through 12, colleges, in the workplace, public and private, that you have the right to go to work and not be exposed to speech or actions of a sexual nature that make you uncomfortable as long as it's reasonable. Just the exact same as harassment for other protected classes. Similar, exactly the same as protected classes harassment. So there is a 4-pronged test to see if an action in a workplace is sexual harassment, and then does it rise to illegal sexual harassment. And to review the test, was someone offended? And remember, we have this law, which is exactly the same as the harassment law, because we are weighing people's rights to interact with the government limitations of the rights of the government to punish speech and actions versus the rights, if it's the private sector, the rights of the business owner to conduct their workplace the way they want. All of those we're balancing, and thus we come up with the same test as protected class harassment. Number 1, was someone offended? If no one is offended, nothing you say, nothing you do of a sexual nature is sexual harassment if everybody involved is okay with it. But once again, just like the harassment lesson, be careful, because how do you know? And how do you know who's standing behind you? And how do you know the person over there is okay with it? But this is the balance of the rights. If everyone is fine, then it's not sexual harassment. By the way, I'm going to mention once again, just so the I told you so comes around, this one's easy. Just don't do it, even if you think it's legal. Sexual talk doesn't have any place in the workplace. It can get you fired. Simple. There you go. That's all you need to know. But we're studying the social studies. So this is literally the official test. If someone was offended, was what was said or done sexual in any way? If it was not sexual, it's literally not sexual harassment. Yet if it was sexual, go to the next step down. Would a reasonable person consider it offensive? This is the safety net to make sure that someone who is extremely easily offended on everything can't thus go in and change, own, decide for themselves whether it's sexual harassment. A reasonable person has to have considered it was offensive. Now, if a reasonable person would say, no, that is such an innocent comment, no one should be offended, then it's not sexual harassment. But if it was reasonably offensive, yes, it is sexual harassment. Now, is it illegal? Will the federal government or state government take action? Well, then it has to be severe enough. One really, really severe time, or little things often enough, would be considered a hostile work environment. And then it would be illegal and the government can get involved. This is determined by court cases. Courts have decided over and over and over again. So how do you know all the court cases? You don't. So this one's easy. Just don't even take a chance. So now we get into some points and considerations, okay? It is a complicated subject, complete with many, many cases in the judicial system, okay? So the rabbit hole is deep. It is interesting. Here are some of the interesting points that may be answering some of your questions. They are definitely good to know. Number one, a person doesn't have to be in the conversation to be sexually harassed. So someone is listening to your conversation, they're in the conversation. Similar to harassment. Also similar to harassment, no one has to say no. The actual first time could be your last time because you're fired. Okay? No one has to say to you, hey, I don't want to hear that kind of talk. That is not part of the law. I mean, if you want it to be part of the law, feel free. You're a citizen and an active member of society. That's what democracy is about. If you want someone to have to say no, well, work for that change. But as it stands right now, the rule is no one has to tell anybody that it is unwelcome. Similar to harassment, intent doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what you were trying to accomplish when someone says something. It could still be sexual harassment. Intent only kind of matters when someone is getting punished for sexual harassment. And then if it truly was innocent and nothing was meant by it, maybe you won't be fired. And maybe the punishment will be less. But intent has nothing to do with the test of sexual harassment. For example, these are literal things that have been proven to be sexual harassment if they're done enough in the workplace. Telling someone to smile more because they'll look better. Or telling someone over and over if they don't want it, you look handsome. Now, just doing it once won't be illegal harassment, but doing it over and over and over actually literally would be. And you could have an argument that, oh no, the person who's saying, hey, smile, is doing something, is wanting to be nice, or saying, hey, you look handsome, wanting to be nice. It don't matter. If the person is offended, these are in the realm of sexual things. And if it's over and over and unwanted, it would be harassment. Especially, and because, and if someone had to prove this, if the one person said smile to only one gender, case done. Or if the person said you look handsome to only one gender, case done. Now, here's a point where it's difficult for harassment to become criminal, although it can. I don't have time to go into that. But sexual harassment can easily cross the line into criminal. So if it's sexual harassment with words, even with words could go criminal, but a lot of sexual harassment could be litigated in the civil court. But some sexual harassment can easily cross the line into criminal court, where jail time and criminal records could be involved. Any kind of touching would go into criminal. Any kind of threats or intimidation could go into criminal. Okay? And now we're talking misdemeanors all the way up to felonies. Sexual harassment can easily go into criminal depending on what it is. Now, please remember, just like harassment, all sexual speech and actions are actionable depending on the rules of your company. Even if the government's not going to get involved, even the slightest thing in a sexual nature could get you in trouble with your company depending on their rules. So this one's a little more in depth. High schools, K through 12, are covered under sexual harassment rules and bullying rules and harassment rules. So it's very, very covered in K through 12. Colleges are a little different because the people are of legal age, older, but they are still regulated by Title IX. You can search what that is. It's the Equality of Sexes law that was passed in the 70s, I believe. Colleges are still regulated, so you can't sexually harass in colleges because it's regulated under Title IX. Now, it has changed over the last 10 years, and it will change going forward. Under the Obama administration, and I say it's the Obama administration because his administration made the letters to the colleges that told them how to enforce Title IX, it was easy to achieve illegality in sexual harassment. Okay? So under the letters from the federal government to the colleges, it was a very low bar to achieve illegality. So sexual harassment done at colleges under the Obama administration could easily be considered illegal and get people into major trouble at their colleges. Under the very recent Trump administration and letters to the colleges of how to enforce Title IX, the level of what it takes to become illegal becomes much harder to reach. And sexual harassment actually has to make someone unable to get an education, to be so bad that the victim of the sexual harassment can't get an education, for it to be illegal federally. Now, that doesn't mean the schools may not have their own rules about it, so I go back to the first darn note of this lesson. It's easy. Just don't. Doesn't have any place in a school environment. It can get you really punished at school. Simple. Don't do it. Words, pictures, stares, jokes, touch can be sexual harassment. Anything that really is reasonably making someone uncomfortable in a sexual way, and if the average person would think that it's definitely not okay, it could be sexual harassment. Now, there are not exact rules. The test is the test, okay? Remember, the test was someone offended, okay? This is the balance of rights. The balance of the government is not going to set this list of things you can and cannot say. It balances individual rights with the power, the all-powerful power of the government. So there are not exact rules, and this makes it messy. It makes it very difficult to navigate. And if you have any kind of trouble reading people or navigating social situations, oh my God, stay so far away from this because it is so messy. There's not a list of rules that you have to follow except for my rule. Just don't. That's the best rule. You'll always be okay. Here's an example. One person at work could hug everybody. They hug literally everybody. And if they don't want a hug from you, and you try to hug them, that's sexual harassment. There's no hugging rule. There's no joke rule. It's all about the sexual harassment test. It's complicated. If your company maybe you're lucky and your company has a list of what to do and not to do. Then you can just refer to the list. Otherwise, there are no exact rules, and it is complicated, and it's a trap. Interesting fact, relationships in the workplace are not illegal. The state government and federal government is never going to punish you for having a consensual adult relationship in the workplace. But it may be against the workplace policy. Many jobs, the bigger companies usually, have a policy where if you're dating coworkers, you have to tell them. And sometimes they have policies, bosses cannot date their people who work for them. Okay, so companies can have whatever policy they want. Now, I don't know. Can a government employment have a no dating law? So, like, could the post office have a no dating clause? That seems to me like it's too much power to the government. I don't think the government can keep you from dating your coworkers. That's interesting. I know private businesses can because it's the rights of the business employer. If the business employer doesn't want dating, they can just make a rule. I don't know if the government can do that. That'd be great research to do. Point. All genders are victims of sexual harassment. All genders are victims. And sexual harassment is reaching a super precedent where it is just not debatable, it is just wrong, and it is just not something acceptable. Quid pro quo is a super precedent, and this sexual harassment of words and speeches, it is just getting to the point of our country where it is reaching a super precedent, and it is just almost always wrong. Let's make a final point. Sexual harassment, more than discrimination, more than harassment for other protected classes, is underreported. More sexual harassment happens than is reported. A couple reasons for that, and I may have missed some, is number one, it is sometimes tough to prove. People, a lot of sexual harassment, although a lot of sexual harassment does happen out in the open, that would be mostly jokes and such like that, where there's witnesses and such like that, okay? But targeted sexual harassment, quid pro quo, targeted individual sexual harassment is really usually done without witnesses. It's tough to prove. It really gets down to a they said situation. And so oftentimes people don't report it because they know it's their word against someone else's word. So that is one of the reasons for the underreporting. There's also, just like harassment, there's a fear of retribution, okay? So if you do report the sexual harassment to the appropriate places, which we'll talk about later, there's always the fear that then you will be punished for it. And remember, it's your job, and people need their job to survive, and it is tough to get new jobs, okay? So that the fear of retribution is very, very real. And with sexual harassment, it's still kind of taboo. Taboo means the society doesn't like to talk about it. That's what taboo means. It's taboo culturally to report and talk about sexual harassment. Now, we're making great strides in that. Recently, it is very much more out in the open, and it is much more accepted to report sexual harassment. It's still, as of this recording, very taboo for men victims. Many men victims do not report, is entirely underreported because of the cultural taboo. Okay, it's just seen as not a thing to do to report it if you're a man. So we are working as a society to make this something that is more out in the open, the reporting of it, so everyone feels comfortable addressing if it's happening to them. So there you have good definitions, good tests for multiple points about sexual harassment in the workplace and in the educational field. All right. Thanks for watching.